So a few of the more common questions that I get from people who are interested in level design are things like, should I go to school? What engine should I use? What should be in my portfolio? How do I interview better? And so on. And there's really, there's no one size fits all answer to all of these questions. But what I'd like to do is cover a different topic in the next 5 to 6 videos so that by the end of this little series, you feel more prepared to answer these questions yourselves and to start or even continue your path in AAA game development. So to kick the whole thing off, we're gonna focus this first video on me, which I hate, but I feel like for context, it's relevant. I'm going to run you through my story of how I got into AAA game development, from modding levels on Call of Duty 2, all the way to getting a job with Treyarch as an intern on Call of Duty Black Ops 2. We'll look at some of the embarrassing maps that I made 15 plus years ago. We'll talk about what my first job interviews were like and what I did at Treyarch. The next one is gonna be the one that covers the benefits and drawbacks to going to school for game development. So if all of this sounds like something that you'd be into, then usually right now is when a YouTuber would say something like, I mean, you know what they say. I don't want to force. I don't want to say it. I don't want to be like that. But that's something. Let's just dive in. Yeah. So the idea of making a level or a map for a game kind of jumped into my head probably around 2000, 2001. My brothers and I, along with some neighborhood kids, we used to play a lot of Starcraft. After a ton of hours in the regular PvP mode, we started to explore the custom game modes that people would make using the provided level editor. One day I was curious and I started up the level editor and I tried to use it. It lasted maybe 10 minutes and I never opened it up again. So fast forward about 5 years and I'm standing in a GameStop or an EB Games at the time, and I was holding Call of Duty 2 and Battlefield 2142. Yeah. And I had been a big fan of World War II games, specifically Medal of Honor, the Medal of Honor series before that. And I knew COD 1 was a big hit, so I decided to go with Call of Duty 2. Now you kind of have to tap into the industry pre-2009 and the landscape of multiplayer FPS games. Most of these games were running on dedicated servers. For the people watching who might not know what dedicated servers are, anyone can rent a server through a game server host company for about $5 to $10 a month. They're still around. You then connect a game to it and play with your friends, or make the server public so anyone who loaded up the game and opened the server browser could join in. The cool part was that if you were a server owner or had admin access, you would have control over some options in the game, like what maps would run, what game types, max player count, and some basic gameplay elements too, like round time, round count, score limit, weapon types. You get the idea. For those reasons, servers were really great for the competitive scene. Imagine voting on those game options with an opposing team, scheduling weekly scrimmages, and just having a blast. And if the game had a level editor alongside it, like the first few Call of Duty games or Counter-Strike, you could download maps that other people made and host them on your server. This was such an incredible time for multiplayer gaming because these servers were cared for by people who love the game. They were fine-tuned, and they would often feel like a community. I mean, they were. You'd hop on, you'd recognize a player from last night or a week ago that you had a good time playing with, and then now they're just your buddy that you play the game with. And it was just so good. Anyway, I remember playing Call of Duty 2 on this server one night, and there was this map that came up, and everybody kept voting for it in the rotation, which that wasn't a stock feature, that was a modded feature for Call of Duty 2. And this map was just a forest. It was just a flat piece of terrain with trees everywhere, and then it was a capture the flag map, and there was just a cutout on each side in front of the spawn area that would just go down into a tunnel that just led directly to the other side of the map. And there was some boxes in the tunnel, some boxes. There's some boxes in the tunnel, and that was it. That was the map. I think that the server was running the max player count on Call Call of Duty 2, which was 64 players in the map, which was crazy. It was nuts. You know, overall, it just kind of broke a lot of the rules that were created by the developers, and I think it just, like, some sort of light bulb went off in my head. Like, oh, you can create your own maps, and they can be different, and people will still like them. So soon after that, I ended up joining one of these COD 2 clans called Outlaw. They're still around. I still keep in contact with some of these people that I met and played with back then.
Well, one day we were all hanging out on our TeamSpeak server, chatting away and playing the game, and the person who ran the whole group, he comes onto the TeamSpeak server, and he pulls a bunch of people into a separate channel to talk.
You know, he was going on about we needed to compete with these other clans who that were running custom maps on their servers and had people in their server, in their clan, that were good at making maps. And he wanted to know if anybody in our clan was interested in learning Radiant, the Call of Duty level editor. He said that he had already started learning and had a few maps of his own in the works, but he wanted more people to try to make maps, and nobody said anything, so I did. Now, I was new in the clan and I loved the game, and so I said, I'll give it a try. And we're gonna take a look at some of those early maps here in a second, but before I do, I wanna say that when I first started, there was no intention of getting a job, like none whatsoever. It was just a fun hobby that I had that I just would dump hours into. I think there was just a very satisfying thought to me that I could create something and then other people would just go and enjoy it and just have fun with it, with me. I think that was really kind of it. It wasn't, I didn't know what level design was. In fact, like the first map file that I opened and saved in Radiant, I think just became my first level. I didn't even try to learn the editor just to kind of like practice before I made an actual map. It was just like the first thing I did was just make a map, and as you might have guessed, it was garbage. Like it sucked, and it went live on a server, and people ripped it apart. And I think it was on the server for maybe a weekend before we decided to take it off because people were complaining too much about it or voting it out of the rotation. Now, unfortunately, I don't actually have the map files for that map. We'll look at like my second one and some other stuff in a second, but I remember it was called Outlaw University, and I just tried to make it like a school or something like that, and it was going to be a capture the flag map, and then I think I got stuck on trying to figure out how to put a different texture on the other side of a brush. But even though this was all backwards and you should never do this, what it did for me was that it got me sucked into the game more, and it got me sucked into wanting to learn the tools more, and it just kind of like, it really just, I don't know, I just went all in from there. All right, so let's jump into the editor and fly around and talk about what was I doing, what was going on in my head, or I guess what wasn't really. Let's load it up. Call of Duty 2 Radiant. Okay, so I don't have the map files for this first one, which is fine. We're just going to look at it in game and talk about what I could have done differently, and point out some things that I commonly see new level designers doing and use this as an example, okay? I'm not going to go through in detail the whole map, and I'm not going to do this for each of my old maps. We're just going to look at this one and kind of skim through a few of the others. So bear with me here while I get it going. Hopefully this, okay, cool. Cool load screen, right? I made that in Photoshop, I think. Wow, this is really the first time that I've looked at this map in a really long time. Okay, so, all right. Design intentions. What was I thinking when I made this map? Not much. I remember, okay, so joking aside, I remember thinking to myself, after the first one, which was not great and didn't go over well, that I needed to kind of scale down. I learned, I got a little wiser. And so I thought a maze would be fun because mazes are made up of walls, and I knew how to make walls in Radiant. So that was kind of the thought process behind it. And then I added a tower because I thought towers were cool. There was a couple other maps that I had played with towers in the middle, and a lot of people would just kind of rush the tower, see who could get to the top. It was like this little kind of king of the hill thing. Even if it was capture the flag, everybody just went to the tower to try to own it. And that was fun. So I added a tower, and that was really it. That was how deep, my mind kind of went with this whole thing. Now, looking at it now, just kind of, I didn't know, like I said, anything about level design before I started working on this. But I played a lot of Call of Duty, so I knew the basic rules. So when I set this out, I knew it was going to be a capture the flag map. I knew that I wanted to have the spawns close to the flags. They had to be on either side of the map. I knew that there had to be lanes or routes to the other side, like the basic things, right? But of course, looking at it now, there's no cover around the flag positions at all, right? This is at a terrible disadvantage. There's a giant hill right there. It's not even a crate. It's not even one crate. There's just awful trees. And, I'm blocking some of the sight lines here, but that's really it, There's even like, right here, there's an MG that just looks directly to the path. Well, I could put some boxes there. That was probably in a version 3 kind of thing. I put boxes there to kind of block it because that's just the path to the other spawn area. So anyway, the list goes on. It's not that great. But the biggest issue with this map that people had at the time was the scale and kind of the readability of the paths and just everything. So if we get down in here and look at it, obviously it's a maze. So it comes with a maze, but it's tight. And these paths you can't really see around. You don't know who's going to come around the corner, who's going to pop up, who you're going to run into. There's not any open space to have like any sort of conflict. And again, there's no cover. And unless you've played the map before, you have no idea where these routes are going to, spit you out. So it's just like, oh, boom, dead end. Like literally there's no way. There's probably not even a mantle on this. You can't even get. What were you thinking, Ryan, when you were 17, 18? I don't know. So it's bad, right? And so I got this feedback a lot. And my solution at the time was to add on this area. Like I didn't think, hey, let me fix the things that people are saying about this. And this is something that I see a lot of people do when they're starting out. And I think the reason is, there's kind of like two things. It's like with this specifically, everyone said that the map was too tight. So my solution was to add on this whole area so that there was more of a footprint. There was more space for people to play. But that's not really a great solution. And that's the other thing I see people do. It's similar. It's just like they just add things. People just, I'm going to add more enemies. I'm going to add this whole area. I'm going to add more weapons. I'm going to add this tower. I'm going to, whatever it might be, right? And so if you get feedback, it's important to understand where that feedback comes from and how you can kind of focus on that feedback with what you have. Because adding this whole area didn't fix the problem, right? Like people were playing this space right here. That's where they have the problem. So adding the whole area didn't fix it, okay? It just kind of introduced more issues. Now looking at it, I know that I could have focused more on fixing the navigation, right? I could have widened these paths a little bit. I could have added more of these little wall breaks in some of the other routes so that people can kind of weave in and out and have more of a circular kind of loop going throughout the whole thing. Better flow, like good multiplayer maps have. They're very circular, right? I could have, if there was, defined routes and lanes, I would have had more breaks in them, a little bit more open spaces so that players had more conflict points. Instead, this whole map just relies on people to kind of rush and flood the middle tower area and just have, crappy combat there where there's this weird angle around the whole thing. So, yeah, not good, right? But believe it or not, this is an improvement over my first map, okay? Where I bit off more than I can chew. I knew going into this map that I needed to scale it down and I needed to kind of focus on what I knew. And that's the thing, is that when you're starting out anything or level design, you're going to be bad at it. You're going to be really bad at it. But over time, you're going to figure out what parts of it, like where your strengths are and what you're good at. And so what happens is that your creative side kind of comes out, and you, when you're making something, if you're focusing on those elements that you're good at, then you're creating something that works within your skill level, right? And that's a good thing. And a lot of people, like I said, like with the first map, I just bit off more than I can chew. I tried to make this big thing. It's just like you're just throwing stuff and seeing what sticks when you're new at something. And that's one of the worst things that you can do, I think. Even, early on you have to do it. That's just how it works. But later on, you have to improve with that, because if you don't, you're just going to keep making the same mistakes over. And even as an experienced designer, one of the worst things that you can do is to try to just do too much and bite off more than you can chew, because you're going to end up with like a half-baked experience. and you don't want that. And you're not going to hit hard on any of the design intentions that you originally set out to, to focus on. So, yeah. Okay, so now we're in the editor. Really quick, this is my third map, Outlaw Hideout. And I just want to kind of touch on some of the stuff we were just talking about real quick. So, one thing that's interesting here is that, and you'll notice this with your own work, is that over time with each map, I improved my skills in some area, okay? And you can actually see the progression when you're looking at the maps, or at least I can. And so this one was still bad, but it was a little bit more balanced. And just to give you some context of what's going on here, there's a flag. It's another capture the flag map. There's a flag in this underground area over here. There's this whole underground area underneath this. Bad idea. And then there's another flag over on this side, right? The American, the Allies. And then there's this this space that connects the two areas. There's an interior space, and there's, I guess, another path up here that kind of directly just goes over there. And then there's this whole other area over here, which again, nobody used, and it was just a big waste to have. And we'll talk about that in a second. But the improvements, so I started to study Call of Duty more, like the stock maps, and I started to study other custom maps that were made. And I started to kind of I started to write down and think about the strengths of those maps and what I liked about them, and tried to look at the patterns there and to try to implement that stuff into my own work. And again, that was just to avoid a lot of the confusion or the feedback that people gave me with the previous maps. So looking at the flag areas, because we did that before, like this flag area, for example, it's not in a giant open field, right? Okay, so that was a win. Good job. There's some cover. Cool. And there's also distinct paths that kind of flow into the space and kind of connect the areas. Awesome. There's a little bit more of a presentation. Players are going to understand their options and see them when they get to the space. That's good. All good stuff. It's still not awesome. I mean, the layout's awful. I mean, it's still, everything could be improved, but it's better than what I did last time, okay? And that's what's important here. And you're going to start to see that with your own work over time. Now there's this whole underground area here. It's huge. It was too much. Again, it was kind of like that other space that I did in the previous map, where it was way too big. This is way too big of a map. Big tunnel. Sorry, I'm flying around here. But really quick, and there's also this other area too that was just kind of added on. It doesn't connect to the flag areas. That would have been a good idea here, right? Like, why didn't I connect this whole thing? Or over here. So it's just this big building, way overscaled. Wow. Baby Ryan. Baby, oh, look at this. Oh man, sorry, I gotta do this. Okay. What are we doing here? Oh, come on. Sorry, anyway. I'm gonna do all those as soon as this video is over. What was I saying? Yeah, this is what happens when you don't have metrics, right? You don't follow metrics, you don't have metrics. I didn't know what metrics were. Little 18-year-old Ryan, 18-year-old Ryan, whole world in front of you, and you didn't have metrics. Bad idea. So I think I only made 2 or 3 more maps for Call of Duty 2. This one was based on Athens, and I remember this one in particular, I started to feel like I finally cracked the code with level design. People seemed to enjoy playing the map. I got better with detailing, and it stayed on our server for a while. And with the detailing thing, it was important for me because I wanted to be Call of Duty dev that I was good at detailing BSP in the editor. Back in the day, studios often didn't have environment art teams, so it was the level designer's responsibility to fully detail the levels and prop them, which is wild when you think about it. But just like in the old days, level design wasn't a separate discipline. It was just part of a programmer's job. So it's the same thing. So yeah, it was really important for me as somebody who wanted to work on Call of Duty to fully detail. And I still love to build and detail scenes in Radiant. It's just really fun. Okay, so my level design skills were improving. My BSP chops were really strong. And this was 2007 now. And for those of you who don't remember, or maybe don't know, something really big in gaming happened that year.
50,000 people used to live here. Now it's a ghost town.
Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare was released, and it blew everybody's mind. The innovative strides in gameplay and storytelling that Modern Warfare brought not only to the COD franchise, but the industry as a whole, were first teased at E3 2007.
Next thing we're going to be showing you guys is going to be by project lead of Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, Jason West. Take it away, Jason.
There's too much radiation. We'll have to go around.
And with just that one playthrough of the all-gillied up single-player mission, everybody, including me, was hooked. Gotcha. A few months after Modern Warfare shipped, Infinity Ward released the modding tools for the game, and they hosted a mapping contest. Unfortunately, I was in the middle of building a remake of a COD UO multiplayer map called Pavlov's House in the Call of Duty 2 editor. And for some reason, I decided to copy and paste it all into the COD 4 editor and tried my best to get it detailed as quickly as I could, and I submitted it to the contest.
It was a bad idea. I mean, don't remake maps in the first place, but also don't submit them to a mapping contest. The cool thing was that 7 years later, when I was finally working at Infinity Ward, I actually found on the network drive the folder where all of these submissions were stored. And there it was, zipped up, all my map files and the README file that I had wrote 7 years ago from my dorm room in New York. And I don't know if this is true, but one of the other designers on the team that was working still back at Infinity Ward during that time, they told me that all of the map submissions, the team, their goal was to try to find somebody to hire as a level designer, but they thought that all of the maps were crap, so they didn't do anything with it. And I remember at the time that they never ended up announcing a winner, or there was never any prizes given away, and I think there was supposed to be. But yeah, the team just thought they were all bad, so they just kind of dropped the whole thing, which I thought was hilarious. So college goes on, I make more maps, I skip class, I party, I skip class to make maps, and then I guess I party more. And by this time I'm a junior, and I realize that I don't want to go to school for what I'm going to school for. I want to work in games, but I'm going to school for audio recording technology and music business, which is cool. I mean, I love the music industry, but I just realized it wasn't really my passion. It wasn't really what I wanted to do. So I start looking for a summer job so that I can get some sort of relevant experience under my belt so that I can start applying to real game studios. I ended up getting a job as an instructor slash camp counselor for this tech camp company called ID Tech Camps. I taught 3 courses. One was with the Starcraft editor, funny enough. The other was with Hammer and then Unreal 3. I had a great time with this job. I met some great people. It was when I realized that teaching and helping other people was extremely satisfying to me, and I was able to use the labs at night to work on my own personal projects, which was awesome. So something that I used to do at the time was go onto all of the studio websites that I wanted to work at, and I would look at the level design roles that they had open, and I would look at all of the requirements for the position before applying. And which is a great idea, by the way, just to kind of gauge what goals you should be hitting and everything before you apply, to see where your skills should be at. But what I used to do, which I don't recommend doing, was I used to apply to the job too, even though I knew I wasn't ready. I was too young, I was still in college. This was just a summer gig at this tech camp, but I don't know, it was just like a thing I did. I was excited, I don't know. Well, lo and behold, I actually got a response back from a recruiter at a THQ studio that was in New York City at the time called Kaos Studios, and they were working on a game called Homefront. The recruiter told me that the design director, Chris Cross, coolest name ever, wanted to interview me for an associate designer position. He had seen my portfolio and I guess was interested in my levels.
Chris previously worked at EA both as a lead designer and then eventually a design director on the Medal of Honor series. Frontline was a big game for me, so when I found this out I was thinking, okay, yeah, when's the interview? Let's do it.
So they set up an interview. Luckily I was at Fordham University in the Bronx, so I was close enough. I take the day off, I go into the city, and the studio is located around, I think it was near Madison Square Park, so it's a super nice area of the city, it was cool. And this was my first time going into a game dev studio. What an experience that is for the first time. You get the intercom, the big glass windows and doors with the logos on it. The waiting area has a ton of art books and game magazines. It's super comfortable. At this point, I'm just describing any game studio. So I meet Chris, super cool dude. He gives me a tour of the studio. He takes me into this conference room, and the lead level designer, this guy Rex Dixon, comes in. Rex is super tall. He's got this like old, worn out Rockstar t-shirt on. I thought it was super badass, and he was a little bit more intimidating than Chris was. I just felt like he really knew his shit, and he was probably thinking like, how is this guy here? How did he get in here? So the interview started fine, like other interviews. It's, how's it going? What's your experience like? Why do you want to work in games? And then I think it was Chris. He gave me a marker, and he asked me to go to the whiteboard and to design lay out a single player mission where the player had to make use of a machine gun, a sniper rifle, and a crab claw. And then they laughed. And it was intimidating to do that. I did it. I don't know how good it was. I mean, it was probably bad. It was probably bad-ish. Then I remember Rex going, "Are you more of a builder or a scripter?" And I said builder. And then he gives me the marker and says, go back up to the whiteboard and draw out the blueprints or Kismet scripting for how to build a spawn counter in Unreal 3. And I froze. I couldn't do it. I wasn't great at scripting, and I didn't know how to make a spawn counter. And they were cool about it, but that was pretty much the end of the interview. Rex actually took me back to the single player area, so I met the other LDs that were working on the game. He sat me down next to his desk, he booted up the game and the editor, and he just started showing me stuff. He started almost like teaching me. He was like, hey, this is a level that we're working on. This trigger does this, and we have to block the player here, and here's a little loading spot, and this is what it looks like when you're just working on things. And it was super cool. I think he kind of knew that, okay, this guy's super green, but he came in here for an interview and it didn't go well. But let me take him under my wing for this short amount of time and just show him the ropes. And it was just really awesome. He ended up giving me his email and his Skype information, and I talked to him a few years later when I went to work on COD. So the moral of the story is to just go for it. Even if you don't meet all the requirements on some website, message people, apply, just get out there, put yourself out there. You have nothing to lose, and except maybe a little pride and motivation, but you'll get that back and you'll be fine. So I go back to school. I'm a senior in college at this point. I get a random email from a recruiter from Sledgehammer Games saying that they saw my portfolio, my website, and that they want to know if I'd be interested in talking to the team more about my experience with Radiant and Call of Duty. Of course, I freak out. I respond with like, hey, I'm still in college, but I'm going to be graduating soon. I'll stop going to school. I'll put it to the side and graduate later to come and work, blah, blah, blah. It was a little bit more professional than that, but that was pretty much my reaction to it. They responded like, no, just focus on school. Reach out to us in the spring when you graduate, and we'll talk then and see what we can do. This was the first time that it started to feel real now that I could actually get a job working in games. The Kaos interview, great experience. It was awesome. But this was Call of Duty now, and I thought, wow, I can actually get a job working on Call of Duty. Like, that's insane to me. Okay, so now I have like this ticking clock. I knew that in 4 to 6 months, I'm gonna be reaching back out, and when I do, I wanna be ready. I wanna have a new project to show, something that I've been working on. So I set out to make a small single-player style Call of Duty mission in the World at War editor. This was a way to kind of force myself to learn the scripting side of things. I knew that if I could pull it off, it would impress the team. So that's what I did. Knowing how to build multiplayer maps and combat spaces that feel good for players is a totally different beast than trying to come up with narrative and gameplay ideas and scenarios in a single player mission. Then of course you have to implement it all and stitch everything together. It has to feel like a cohesive and smooth experience for people. It's a lot to do, and at the time I didn't really understand basic programming logic or gameplay logic. So I definitely had my work cut out for me. So I plan out this 3-beat small mission, takes place in a French village. There's an enemy boss tank posted up that players have to try to circumvent either by destroying it or by navigating the space to get around it to the next area. I never completely finished it, and I don't know if I would recommend trying to learn a C-based style scripting language without having some basic knowledge about programming or logic beforehand. But it definitely helped me pick up a lot of the COD logic and some basic single-player design elements like enemy placement, engagement distances, spawn counters, basic flow, that type of stuff. Okay, so fast forward now to the spring. I'm all ready to start talking to Sledgehammer. But then I see that Treyarch has a posting for a level design intern to work on what would be Black Ops 2. So I decide to apply. They get back to me, and after 1 or 2 emails with the recruiter, they get me on the phone for an interview with this guy, Kevin Worrell, who was the lead level designer at the time. And he's really keen on my experience with Radiant, wants to, just talk about what I know and how comfortable I am with it. And they decide to give me a design test, which I think I would call it more of an art test, since it was really just building a small scene in Radiant. I think I had to build a fully detailed and lit building exterior and 1 room interior, and that was it. Because I knew the COD tool so well, I just kind of went to town on detailing the hell out of this small asylum-style building and submitted it, and they offered me the job. And 2 weeks after graduation, I was getting on a plane for the first time in my life with my backpack and my skateboard to go work on Black Ops 2. It was pretty wild. Now, of course, it was a paid internship. It was $11 an hour plus overtime. And remember, this was 2011, so with inflation, that would be about $13 an hour today. They also stipended me $1,700 a month for living expenses, paid for the flights, and even helped me find a place because I was having trouble finding one myself. They emailed out to the team, and luckily, an awesome programmer, Penny Chalk, she had a spare room and a futon that I ended up sleeping on for that summer. I really did enjoy working on Black Ops 2. I learned a lot about making games and a lot about the AAA environment, both good and bad, in those 7 months. So what exactly did I work on while I was at Treyarch? So the first thing was to create a small test level or a diorama in the editor just to get used to the tools.
I had 2 weeks to do it, so I decided to make a small Cold War era Russian base. It was like playing with all new toys because I had access to all of the Black Ops 1 assets and materials. I built it all from scratch, so even though it looks like something copy and pasted from Black Ops 1, it was all fresh geo. My lead Kevin was happy with it, so I was given a small area on the E3 LA level to do some non-gameplay focused building work for 2 more weeks. I wasn't responsible for too much, but I was on the team. I was going to the meetings, I had more of a voice, all of that. I remember some of these buildings were not built in real life when we made the game, but the art team tracked down concepts of what would be built around downtown LA. For this building that we're looking at here, I had 1 concept image from Google to work off of. What's funny is a few years later I was in downtown LA, and I must have been walking down the street or coming out of a coffee shop or something, and there it was, right in front of me. It was kind of wild. After working on the LA stuff, the gloves really came off, and I was assigned to work on the Panama campaign mission. It was called Suffer With Me, which is a flashback 80s mission where you play as Frank Woods during the 1989 invasion of Panama. There were 3 LDs and 2 level scripters on this Panama level. For level design, Mike Madden owned the prologue and the entire first part of the mission, so what we're looking at now. He owned everything up to this dingy motel where there's a narrative beat with Manuel Noriega. Following this narrative beat was the section that I owned called the Slums. All right, so let's play a little bit of the Slums and I'll walk you through what's going on here. It is a long mission. There was a prologue already and an intro that I played through, and I can't skip around on the retail copy, I don't think. So hopefully I don't have to do this more than once. So, all right, here we go. It's been a long time. So this first section here is meant to villainize the enemy faction. They're called the Dingbats, which was a nickname for the Dignity Battalion, which was Noriega's militia. Oh shit, sorry. All right, take 2. All right, and the reason why this is happening, the whole point of this scene, like I said, is to villainize them, but also to show the player, what they're up against. These enemies are really aggressive and they charge. They have bats, I believe. And I'm gonna switch my weapon so that doesn't happen again. Okay, it's gonna wait for me to kick it off, I guess. Oh no, don't kill him. Let's see if we can get him to charge. Yeah, see. All right, so there's a nice little contained space where the player just gets a taste of that, a little setup. And then we're gonna see a lot more of that in the Slums next. So now when I was there, this whole section right here this building was destroyed and it was like cored out, and there was a giant ramp of rubble that we would walk up. I don't know why it moved down to this floor. Maybe it was just saving art time to have to art all of that. But the reason why I like that before was, you'll see in a minute here when we get to the next section. I might have to skip ahead. But the whole building up there is like half destroyed, and so it spits you out into the next space with like a nice 45-degree angle view. So you just get a nice read, and then the whole shtick with the next area is about multipath. So you get this nice read, and you know like what your options are going left or right down the street. You still get it with this. We'll see in just a second here. But I prefer the nice overlook spot. Let's see.
U.S. forces are pushing into the city.
There we go.
Invasion's in full swing. We push north. Watch for
So like I said, the whole shtick with this area was to kind of give players options to go down all these different routes. You know, this was a big deal, I remember, at the time, because you know, Call of Duty isn't really known for its non-linear level design. You know, some of the older Call of Duties, especially like Call of Duty 2 and Modern Warfare 1, there were a lot of spaces that had a really big footprint that the player can kind of toy around in, and it gave players a lot of agency to kind of do what they wanted to do within that space, and it didn't feel like a giant hallway, which was really great, really smart way to design something. But yeah, it's not really multi-path level design, right? So with this, it was more about having these distinct, like funnily, windy, distinct paths that you could go down, and we had these scripted vignettes. So everything kind of felt like its own little hallway with a moment or moments.
They got a heavy gun bunkered on the balcony.
I might skip around just to get to all the juicy stuff. We'll see how it goes. All right, so I want to get to one of those little vignettes. I think I'm getting to one soon.
Eyes high, ones. They got the high ground, rooftops and windows. Stay in cover.
Yeah, so here, I think, here's one that I pitched. I remember pitching a lot of these and coming up with these ideas with Kevin Drew. I'm gonna wait, I think, okay. Kevin Drew was the level scripter on this level at the time. I think he still works at Treyarch. I think he's like an associate director now. Pretty cool. All right. Let's see here. Yeah, this one right here. I think I do, is he? Okay, yeah. So there was all these little custom vignettes like that, just to kind of spice things up a little bit. Give you something that you don't really usually see playing this game.
Crazy fucking bastard. Which way now, fuckface?
I like this next section up here is my favorite. I remember, yeah, the park. We had some cool reference for this, and I had a lot of fun building this space. I really like circular spaces, and yeah, building these planters was really fun, and just setting it up so that you can kind of weave in and out and take cool, you know, bits of cover back here and everything. Oh well. All right. I remember I got a lot of feedback at the time that this space in particular, but a lot of this whole area that we're about to kind of get into, felt like a multiplayer map, the way that it was laid out, which was fine by me. I didn't even see him. And you know, to my surprise, when the game shipped, there was a multiplayer Slums level, and it was made up of mostly all of this geo that we're looking at right here. So I don't know what MP designer did it, but it's awesome because there's a lot of the geo work that I did in that multiplayer map. And it was a pretty popular one too. I think it was remastered and shipped with Black Ops 4 too. I was wrong. It was actually this area up here that was in the multiplayer map. I don't have any ammo. Cool. No? What? Yeah, okay, cool. Oh. And I really have to give props to I mean, a lot of people, everybody on the team. But James Casano was the level designer that took over this level. There might have been one other person too, at least in this section. I know it was James, who took over this section and detailed it up to ship. James is a good dude. He's from New York. He's from Long Island, just like me. And he is still at Treyarch too, I believe. Then Ian Bowie was the designer for this section that we're going to get up to here in a minute at the next checkpoint. And Ian is now a design director at ILM. And I think he works on a lot of Star Wars VR projects. Pretty impressive stuff. And then Damon Shabastari was the other scripter on the mission with Kevin. And Shabs, good old Shabs, he was last at First Contact Entertainment, which is a VR studio. They did, what was it? Firewall, 0 Hour, Fire Zero. I'm not a VR person, but it was a very popular VR game. Here are some early Blockout images and concepts of the Slums from way back in 2011. At the time, Treyarch had one designer who would build the pre-viz Blockout for all of the campaign missions, this guy Brian Douglas. He would take 4 to 6 weeks to sloppily but still impressively do a basic first pass of each level before handing the geo off to the mission teams. He worked closely with the writing team and creative director to make sure that the narrative moments had their rough footprint and that the high-level pacing was more or less locked in. Of course, a good amount of that Blockout would be thrown out, scoped down, or changed by the next designer who owned it, but it was still a solid foundation to start from. Since I was new, it was fine for me not to build the first pass or to be involved in those early discussions. But in my opinion, the designers working on the mission should own the mission from the start. And that's one thing that I was really grateful for later on at Neversoft and Infinity Ward, because we had way more creative input and responsibility as designers. I don't know if Treyarch still works like that, but that's how it was at the time.
Now, the summer internships were only supposed to last for the summer, but the studio wanted to extend everybody's contract up to the end of December of that year, which makes sense because it was the beginning of the project. But as New Year's approached, it kind of turned into, we want to see if we can get everybody extended to the end of the project, which would be like another 1.5 years. Now, I was having a great time, but it's typical that you have to start paying back student loans 6 months after you graduate. So I really wanted to make sure that I could secure a full-time job by then. Even though a lot of internships are paid, you usually don't qualify for any of the company benefits, and that includes a game bonus. I felt like it would have been a better approach for the studio to hire on any of the interns that were sticking around until the end of the project as juniors. So I decided that I was going to apply to other studios, so I let Treyarch know, and they were totally cool with it. I applied to Neversoft Entertainment, which was another Activision studio at the time, and you might remember them from the Tony Hawk series and a lot of Guitar Hero games. They were apparently making their own Call of Duty game and were ramping up. And Neversoft was kind of like the road less taken because they hadn't done anything in a while. There had been some layoffs at the studio, and they had never worked on a Call of Duty game, of course, before. So it was kind of risky. And I, of course, was having a great time working at Treyarch on Black Ops 2. But the studio just felt like more of my vibe. I remember walking into the studio for the first time, getting greeted by the studio owner's, the studio head's dog, this big white husky named Riley. It was like the kind of studio mascot. And there was just the broken skateboards and guitars on the wall, and there was like this oldish kind of like 90s like red carpet, and it was in this old toy factory. And you can kind of just feel the history of the place, and it just felt like more of my vibe, like somewhere I wanted to go every day to work. So yeah, I went with Neversoft, and it was definitely one of the best decisions that I've made in my career. And that's it. That's the story of how I got into AAA games. I think it's definitely worth having another video or two to talk about Neversoft and my time on Call of Duty after that with Infinity Ward as well. But thanks for watching and helping me kick this whole thing off. If you haven't already, subscribe. The next video is going to be out soon, I promise. And feel free to comment any topic that you want to see us cover in the future, and we'll try to make it happen.
See you next time in the Society.